What would you do if you discovered that your entire life was built on a lie? Margaret Chen has worked as a housekeeper in the Whitmore mansion for 15 years, invisible to the wealthy family she serves, raising her daughter Lily alone through sacrifice and double shifts. But when she accidentally discovers a hidden letter in her employer's desk, everything she believed about her daughter's birth shatters in an instant. The elegant handwriting reveals a truth so devastating it will tear apart not just one family but two. A secret 18 years in the making, a betrayal that runs deeper than blood, and a choice that will force a young woman to decide between justice and peace, between claiming what was stolen from her and protecting the only life she's ever known. Some secrets are buried for a reason, but once unearthed, they change everything. This is a story about identity, sacrifice, and the complicated truth that sometimes the people who raise us aren't the ones who gave us life, and sometimes that makes all the difference. If you want to discover how this family's carefully constructed lies unravel, and what decision Lily ultimately makes about her future, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment below telling us where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring you more compelling stories like this one. The rain hammered against the windows of the Whitmore estate with an intensity that seemed to match the chaos unfolding inside. Margaret Chen stood frozen in the doorway of the master study, her cleaning cart abandoned in the hallway behind her. Her hands trembled as she clutched the envelope she'd just discovered hidden beneath a false bottom in the mahogany desk drawer. An envelope with her daughter's name written in elegant script across the front. For 15 years, Margaret had worked as a housekeeper in this mansion, moving through its opulent rooms like a ghost, invisible to the family that employed her. She'd raised her daughter Lily alone, working double shifts to afford the modest apartment they called home, never once questioning the circumstances of her child's birth. But now, holding this envelope, everything she thought she knew about her life was crumbling like sand through her fingers. The letter inside was dated 18 years ago, written in a hand she recognized immediately. Victoria Whitmore's elegant cursive. Margaret's vision blurred as she read the words that would shatter her world. To whomever finds this letter, the child known as Lily Chen is my biological daughter. In a moment of weakness and fear of scandal, I arranged for her to be given to Margaret Chen, my housekeeper at the time, telling everyone the child had been stillborn. I paid Margaret to raise her as her own, never revealing the truth. But blood cannot be denied forever. Lily is the rightful heir to the Whitmore fortune, not my legitimate son James. She carries my DNA, my features, my very soul. This secret has haunted me every day since. Margaret's legs gave out and she sank into the leather chair where countless Whitmore patriarchs had sat before. The implications crashed over her like waves during a storm. Lily wasn't her biological daughter. The woman she'd served faithfully for over a decade had paid her, essentially bought her baby. And now that baby was 18, about to graduate high school, planning to work minimum wage jobs to afford community college because Margaret couldn't provide more. Meanwhile, upstairs in this very mansion, James Whitmore III lived a life of privilege that belonged to Lily by birthright. "What are you doing in here?" The sharp voice cut through Margaret's shock. She looked up to find Victoria Whitmore standing in the doorway, her silver hair perfectly coiffed despite the late hour, her blue eyes that Margaret now recognized in her daughter's face, narrowed with suspicion. "I found this." Margaret's voice was steadier than she felt as she held up the letter. "All these years you've been lying to me, to everyone, to Lily." Victoria's composed expression cracked for just a moment, revealing something raw beneath, fear perhaps, or regret. She stepped into the room and closed the door behind her with a soft click that sounded final, like the closing of a tomb. "You were never supposed to find that," Victoria said quietly, moving to the crystal decanter on the sidebar and pouring herself a generous measure of scotch. "I should have destroyed it years ago, but I couldn't bring myself to erase the only acknowledgement of my daughter's existence." "Your daughter?" Margaret stood, anger finally breaking through her shock. "She's been my daughter for 18 years. I raised her. I sat with her through every fever, every nightmare, every heartbreak. I worked myself to exhaustion to give her whatever little I could. And you, You just watched. You saw us struggling while you lived here in luxury and you never said a word. I gave you money, Victoria replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Every month beyond your salary. You always thought it was bonuses for good work. Blood money, Margaret spat. You bought your daughter and your silence with blood money. Victoria took a long drink, her hand shaking slightly. You don't understand the pressure I was under. I was young, unmarried, having an affair with someone completely inappropriate. My father's business partner, a married man. If the scandal had come out, it would have destroyed my family's reputation, our business empire, everything my ancestors built. My father gave me an ultimatum. Get rid of the problem or be disowned. Lily wasn't a problem. Margaret's voice rose despite herself. She was a baby, an innocent child. I know that now, Victoria said, and for the first time, Margaret heard genuine anguish in her voice. Do you think I don't regret it every single day? Watching her grow up from a distance, seeing glimpses of her when you'd bring her with you to work before she started school? She has my mother's smile, my determination, my love for classical music. She's everything I could have hoped for in a daughter, and I threw that away because I was too much of a coward to stand up to my father. Margaret's anger wavered, but only slightly. What about James? Does he know he's not really the heir? James is my son too, Victoria said defensively. I married Robert Whitmore when Lily was 6 months old. James was born a year later. He's legitimate in every legal sense. But you're right. If DNA determines inheritance, then Lily has the stronger claim. She's the firstborn. The weight of this revelation settled over the room like heavy fog. Through the windows, lightning illuminated the manicured gardens, casting everything in stark relief for a moment before plunging back into darkness. What do you want from me? Victoria finally asked, her usual imperious tone replaced with something closer to resignation. Money? More money to keep quiet? Margaret looked at the woman who had employed her, lied to her, and fundamentally shaped her entire adult life through deception. She thought of Lily at home, probably doing homework at their small kitchen table, dreaming of a future she'd have to fight for every step of the way while the Whitmore children had everything handed to them. I don't know, Margaret admitted. But Lily deserves to know the truth. She deserves to make her own choices about her identity, her future, her family. If you tell her, everything changes, Victoria warned. For all of us, this family has enemies, business rivals, social climbers, people who would use this information to destroy us, and Lily would be caught in the crossfire. Maybe she's stronger than you think, Margaret said. Maybe she deserves the chance to be stronger than you were. Victoria flinched as if she'd been slapped. Before she could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Both women turned toward the door as it opened to reveal James Whitmore, 26 years old and heir apparent to the Whitmore empire, his expression curious as he looked between his mother and the housekeeper. Mother, is everything all right? I heard raised voices. Margaret's heart pounded. The letter was still in her hand, visible if James looked closely enough. Victoria's eyes met hers across the room, a silent plea passing between them. In that moment, Margaret held the power to detonate this family's carefully constructed world. The question was whether she had the courage to light the fuse. Margaret's mind raced as James stood in the doorway, his expensive suit slightly rumpled from the late hour, his eyes moving between her tense posture and his mother's unusually flustered expression. The letter felt like it was burning in her hand, the paper suddenly heavy with the weight of 18 years of deception. She could feel her pulse hammering in her throat, each heartbeat a countdown to a decision that would change everything. Everything is fine, darling, Victoria said smoothly, her composure sliding back into place like a well-worn mask. Her voice carried that practiced tone of dismissal that Margaret had heard 1,000 times over the years, the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Margaret was just updating me on some household matters. Nothing that concerns you. But James didn't move from the doorway. His gaze lingered on Margaret's face, and she realized with a sinking feeling that her expression must have betrayed more than she intended. James had always been observant, a trait that served him well in business negotiations. Unlike his mother, who could lie with the ease of breathing, Margaret had never learned to hide her emotions behind practiced indifference. "At 11 o'clock at night?" James asked, his tone gentle but skeptical. "And with the study door closed?" "Mother, you never close this door when discussing household matters." Margaret watched as Victoria's jaw tightened imperceptibly, a muscle twitching near her temple, the only outward sign of her growing tension. The older woman set down her scotch glass with deliberate care, and Margaret could almost see her mind working, calculating the best way to deflect her son's suspicions. "James, really, this is inappropriate," Victoria began, but Margaret's resolve suddenly crystallized. She thought of Lily at home, her daughter who wasn't really her daughter, who had spent her entire life believing she was the child of a housekeeper when she was actually born into one of the wealthiest families on the East Coast. She thought of all the times Lily had asked about her father, about why they didn't have the things other families had, about whether she was good enough, smart enough, worthy enough. "No," Margaret heard herself say, her voice cutting through Victoria's protests. "He should know. They all should know." Victoria's face went pale, then flushed with anger. "Margaret, don't you dare." "Lily is your daughter," Margaret said, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess herself. She turned to James, whose expression had shifted from curiosity to confusion. "Your half-sister. Your mother gave birth to her 18 years ago and gave her to me to raise as my own. She paid me to keep the secret, to let everyone believe the baby had been stillborn." The silence that followed was deafening. James stood frozen, his hand still on the doorknob, his face a mask of shock that slowly morphed into something else. Hurt, betrayal, disbelief. He looked at his mother as if seeing her for the first time, his eyes searching her face for denial that never came. "James, let me explain," Victoria started, her voice cracking in a way Margaret had never heard before. The Imperious Society matriarch was gone, replaced by a mother who could see everything she'd built beginning to crumble. "It was before I met your father, before you were born. I was young and terrified and—" "Lily?" James interrupted, his voice hollow. "The girl who used to play in the gardens when she was little? The one who helped you with groceries sometimes, Margaret? She's my sister?" Margaret nodded, tears finally spilling over despite her efforts to maintain control. "I didn't know the truth until tonight. I thought she was mine, biologically mine. Your mother never told me. She let me believe I was her real mother all these years." James stumbled backward into the hallway, one hand pressed against his chest as if the revelation had physically wounded him. Margaret could see him processing the implications, his brilliant mind working through the complications this secret created. If Lily was Victoria's firstborn, then technically, by the terms of the Whitmore family trust established by his grandfather, she had claim to the inheritance. The empire that James had been groomed since birth to inherit might not be his at all. "Does father know?" James asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Victoria shook her head, wrapping her arms around herself in an uncharacteristic gesture of vulnerability. "No one knew except Margaret and me, and I paid her enough to ensure her silence." "You bought her," James said flatly, and the disgust in his voice made Victoria flinch. "You bought your own daughter like property, and then what? Just watched her grow up in poverty while we lived like this?" He gestured around the opulent study with its first edition books and priceless artwork. "I made sure she was cared for," Victoria protested weakly. "I gave Margaret extra money every month. I watched over her from a distance. I made sure she was safe." "But you never held her," Margaret said quietly, years of suppressed anger finally finding voice. "You never comforted her when she had nightmares. You never celebrated her achievements or helped her with homework or talked to her about her dreams. You gave money, but you never gave her what she actually needed, a mother who claimed her." James sank into a chair near the fireplace, his head in his hands. Margaret could see his shoulders shaking slightly, though whether from anger or grief she couldn't tell. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily, marking the seconds as all three of them grappled with the enormity of what had been revealed. "Does Lily know?" James finally asked, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. Not yet, Margaret admitted. I just found the letter an hour ago. I came straight here to confront your mother. You have to tell her, James said firmly, his voice growing stronger. She deserves to know who she really is, and she deserves everything this family owes her, her birthright, her inheritance, her name. James, think about what you're saying, Victoria pleaded, moving toward her son. If this becomes public, the scandal will destroy us. Our competitors will use it against us. The board will question my judgment, your legitimacy as heir. Everything your grandfather built was built on lies, apparently. James cut her off, standing abruptly. He looked at his mother with an expression of profound disappointment that seemed to age him years in an instant. I can't believe you did this. I can't believe you've been living with this secret, watching that girl struggle and saying nothing. He turned to Margaret, his expression softening slightly. When are you going to tell her? Margaret's hands trembled as she folded the letter carefully, tucking it into her pocket. Tonight, as soon as I get home. She deserves to hear it from me before this becomes something else, something bigger that we can't control. I want to meet her, James said suddenly. Properly, I mean. Not as the housekeeper's daughter, but as my sister. Will you allow that? The question hung in the air, laden with possibility and danger in equal measure. Margaret looked between James's earnest face and Victoria's pale, stricken expression, realizing that this moment was a threshold. Once crossed, there would be no going back to the comfortable lies they'd all been living. The rain had finally stopped by the time Margaret pulled her old sedan into the cracked driveway of their apartment building. The silence felt oppressive after the storm, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for what came next. Her hands were still shaking as she gripped the steering wheel, staring up at the second-floor window where warm light spilled out. Lily's bedroom, where her daughter was probably still awake, studying for her college entrance exams that suddenly seemed both crucially important and utterly irrelevant. Margaret sat in the car for several long minutes, watching that window, trying to find the words that could possibly convey what she needed to say. How did you tell someone that everything they believed about their identity was a lie? That the woman who raised them wasn't their biological mother? That they were actually born into wealth and privilege, but were stolen from that life before they could even remember it? The letter felt like a lead weight in her purse, physical proof of a betrayal that went back 18 years. Margaret thought about all the times she'd held Lily as a baby, marveling at how different she looked from herself. Those striking blue eyes when Margaret's were brown, that naturally wavy blonde hair when Margaret's was straight and black. She'd always attributed it to Lily's unknown father, a man Margaret had invented in her mind to explain away the inconsistencies. Now she knew the truth. Lily looked different because she was Victoria Whitmore's daughter, carrying the genes of one of the oldest families in New England. Finally, knowing she couldn't delay any longer, Margaret climbed out of the car and made her way up the exterior stairs to their apartment. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if she was walking toward an execution rather than a conversation. She paused outside the door, her key in the lock, listening to the faint sound of music coming from inside. Chopin, one of Lily's favorites. Her daughter had taught herself piano using YouTube videos and a donated keyboard from a church charity sale, spending hours practicing despite never having formal lessons. Victoria had mentioned loving classical music. The connection now seemed painfully obvious. Margaret pushed open the door and found Lily exactly where she'd imagined, curled up on the threadbare sofa with textbooks spread around her, her blonde hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing the oversized MIT sweatshirt she'd bought at a thrift store because she dreamed of attending one day. The girl looked up with a smile that quickly faded when she saw Margaret's expression. "Mom? What's wrong?" Lily immediately closed her textbook and stood, concern etched across her delicate features. "Did something happen at work? Did Mrs. Whitmore fire you?" The innocent worry in her daughter's voice nearly broke Margaret's resolve. She wanted nothing more than to lie, to protect Lily from this devastating truth, to keep their simple life intact even if it was built on deception. But James's words echoed in her mind. Lily deserved to know who she really was. Sit down, sweetheart, Margaret said softly, setting her purse on the small dining table and moving to join Lily on the sofa. We need to talk about something important, something I just learned tonight that changes everything. Lily's blue eyes widened with alarm, and she tucked her legs underneath herself, preparing for bad news. Are you sick? Is it cancer? Mom, please just tell me. I'm not sick, Margaret interrupted gently, reaching out to take Lily's hand. The girl's fingers were cold despite the warmth of the apartment, and Margaret squeezed them reassuringly. But what I need to tell you is going to be difficult to hear. It's going to change how you see yourself, how you see me, how you see everything about your life. You're scaring me, Lily whispered, and Margaret could see tears already forming in those striking eyes. Victoria's eyes, she now realized with painful clarity. Margaret took a deep breath and pulled the letter from her purse, her hands trembling as she unfolded it. I found this tonight at the Whitmore estate, hidden in Mrs. Whitmore's desk. Before I read it to you, I need you to know that I love you more than anything in this world. You are my daughter in every way that matters. But biologically, her voice cracked, and she had to pause to compose herself. Biologically, you're not mine. The confusion on Lily's face was heartbreaking. What do you mean? I don't understand. Are you saying I'm adopted? Not exactly, Margaret said, tears now streaming freely down her cheeks. Mrs. Whitmore, Victoria Whitmore, is your biological mother. She gave birth to you 18 years ago and gave you to me to raise as my own. She paid me to keep the secret, to let everyone believe you were my natural daughter. The color drained from Lily's face as the words sank in. She pulled her hand away from Margaret's grasp, standing abruptly and backing away, as if physical distance could somehow make the revelation less real. That's not possible. That's insane. Why would you say something like that? Because it's true, Margaret said, holding out the letter. Read it yourself. It's in her handwriting. She wrote it years ago, probably as some kind of confession or insurance policy. I never knew the truth until tonight. I swear to you, Lily, I thought you were mine. I thought I'd given birth to you, that you were my biological child. She lied to both of us. Lily snatched the letter with shaking hands, her eyes scanning the elegant script. Margaret watched as her daughter's face transformed through a cascade of emotions: disbelief, shock, anger, confusion, hurt. When Lily finally looked up, her expression was devastated, tears pouring down her cheeks unchecked. So my entire life is a lie? Lily's voice was raw with pain. Everything I thought I knew about who I am, where I come from, it's all fake? Your life isn't a lie, Margaret insisted, standing and trying to approach her daughter, but Lily held up a hand to stop her. The love between us is real. The memories we've made, the bond we share, that's all real. What's a lie is the story of how you came to be mine. But I'm not yours, Lily cried out, her voice breaking. You just said so yourself. I'm hers. That woman's. The woman you work for. The woman who's had everything while we've had nothing. And you knew? All this time you knew? No, Margaret said desperately. I didn't know until tonight. I thought the money she gave me was bonuses for good work. I never questioned it because I needed it so badly to take care of you. I would never have agreed to this if I'd understood what she was really asking. But you did agree, Lily interrupted, her voice rising to a shout. You took her money. You raised her daughter while she got to pretend she never existed. You helped her hide me away like some dirty secret. The girl was sobbing now, her whole body shaking with the force of her emotions. Did you ever even want me? Or was I just a paycheck to you? The words hit Margaret like physical blows, each one more painful than the last. Don't say that. Don't ever say that. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. I loved you from the moment I first held you. Whatever the circumstances of how you came into my life, my love for you has always been genuine and complete. Lily turned away, wrapping her arms around herself, her shoulders heaving with sobs. The music had stopped playing, leaving only the sound of her daughter's grief filling their small apartment. Margaret wanted to go to her, to hold her and comfort her the way she had when Lily was small, but she sensed that any physical approach would be rejected. "James wants to meet you," Margaret said quietly after several minutes of painful silence. "Your half-brother. He found out tonight too, and he was angry with his mother. He called you his sister. He said you deserve your birthright." Lily spun around, her face blotchy and wet with tears. "My birthright? Is that supposed to make this better? I'm supposed to be happy because I'm secretly rich? Because I belong to some fancy family instead of being the daughter of a housekeeper?" 3 days passed in agonizing silence. Lily had locked herself in her bedroom, refusing to eat more than a few bites, declining Margaret's attempts at conversation through the closed door. The apartment felt like a tomb, heavy with unspoken words and shattered trust. Margaret had called in sick to work for the first time in 15 years, unable to face Victoria Whitmore, or the mansion that now represented everything that had been stolen from her daughter. On the morning of the 4th day, Margaret woke to find Lily's bedroom door open and her daughter sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the letter that had destroyed their world. The girl looked older somehow, as if the revelation had aged her overnight. Dark circles shadowed her eyes and her usually vibrant face was pale and drawn. She was still wearing the MIT sweatshirt, now wrinkled from days of wear, her hair unbrushed and tangled. "I want to meet them," Lily said without preamble, not looking up from the letter. Her voice was flat, emotionless, so different from the warm, animated tone Margaret was used to hearing. "My biological mother and my brother. I need to see them, to understand what kind of people would do this." Margaret's heart clenched with a mixture of relief that Lily was finally speaking to her and dread at what this meeting might bring. She moved carefully to the kitchen, putting on water for tea with hands that still trembled slightly. "Are you sure you're ready for that? We could wait, give you more time to process." "I've had 3 days to process," Lily interrupted, finally meeting Margaret's eyes. The coldness in her gaze made Margaret want to weep. 3 days of lying in bed wondering who I really am, whether anything about my life has been real. I need answers, and the only people who can give them to me are the Whitmores. Margaret nodded slowly, pulling out her phone with reluctance. "James gave me his number. He's been calling every day, asking about you, wanting to know when he could meet you properly. He seems genuinely concerned." "Of course he's concerned," Lily said bitterly. "I'm a threat to his inheritance, aren't I? The illegitimate daughter who showed up to claim what's rightfully hers. I bet he's terrified." "That's not fair," Margaret protested gently. "James was angry with his mother when he found out. He defended you. He said you deserved your birthright." Lily laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. How noble of him. The privileged heir willing to acknowledge his poor sister's existence. Should I be grateful? The sarcasm was so unlike Lily's usual sweet nature that it hurt Margaret more than open anger would have. She sat down across from her daughter, reaching out tentatively to touch her hand. This time, Lily didn't pull away, though she didn't return the gesture either. "I know you're angry," Margaret said softly. "You have every right to be. But taking that anger out on James isn't fair either. He's as much a victim of his mother's lies as you are. A victim who grew up in a mansion with every advantage while I wore thrift store clothes and worried about whether we could afford groceries," Lily countered. "Some victim." Margaret couldn't argue with that. She withdrew her hand and picked up her phone, scrolling to James's contact information. "I'll call him. We can meet somewhere neutral if you prefer. You don't have to go to the mansion if you're not ready." "No," Lily said firmly, standing abruptly and finally meeting Margaret's eyes with determination. "I want to see it. The house where I should have grown up. The life that was supposed to be mine. Call him and tell him we're coming today." 2 hours later, Margaret's sedan pulled through the ornate iron gates of the Whitmore estate, and Lily pressed her face to the window, taking in the sprawling grounds with wide eyes. Margaret watched her daughter's expression shift from defiance to awe, to something that looked painfully like grief. This could have been Lily's home, these manicured gardens her playground, that fountain where she could have tossed pennies and made wishes as a child. "It's bigger than I remembered," Lily whispered, her bravado cracking slightly. "I used to think it was like a castle when you'd bring me with you sometimes as a kid. I'd pretend I was a princess, visiting a magical kingdom." The irony of those childhood fantasies hung heavy between them. Lily had been a princess of sorts, playing in the gardens of her own ancestral home without knowing it, while her biological mother watched from the windows above, too cowardly to claim her. James was waiting on the front steps as they pulled up, and Margaret was struck by how much he and Lily resembled each other now that she knew to look for it. They both had Victoria's blue eyes, the same elegant bone structure, similar gestures. James had dressed casually, jeans and a simple button-down shirt, clearly trying not to intimidate with displays of wealth, but his shoes alone probably cost more than Margaret's monthly rent. Lily climbed out of the car slowly, and Margaret saw her daughter's hands clench into fists at her sides, her entire body rigid with tension. James descended the steps carefully, stopping a respectful distance away, his expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Lily," he said softly, and there was genuine emotion in his voice. "I'm James, your brother. I'm so sorry about all of this." "Are you?" Lily challenged, lifting her chin defiantly. "Or are you just sorry that your perfect life got complicated?" James flinched but held his ground. "I'm sorry that you were robbed of the childhood you deserved. I'm sorry that our mother was too weak to do the right thing. And yes, I'm sorry that finding out about you has made me question everything I thought I knew about my family. But mostly, I'm sorry that we lost 18 years of knowing each other." The sincerity in his words seemed to penetrate Lily's armor slightly. Her shoulders relaxed a fraction, though her expression remained guarded. Margaret stayed by the car, sensing that this moment needed to belong to the siblings, not her. "She's inside?" Lily asked, her voice smaller now, almost childlike. "My biological mother?" James nodded. "She's in the drawing room. She's not handling this well. She knows she's about to face you, and I think the guilt is finally catching up to her." He paused, studying Lily's face with obvious curiosity and something that looked like affection. "You have our mother's eyes, and her determination. I can see it in how you're standing here refusing to be intimidated by any of this." "I'm terrified," Lily admitted suddenly, her voice breaking. "I'm so angry I can barely breathe, but I'm also terrified. What if she looks at me and regrets keeping me even as a secret? What if she wishes I'd never been born at all?" Margaret's heart broke watching her daughter's vulnerability, and she started to move forward, but James beat her to it. He stepped closer to Lily, his expression gentle and understanding in a way that surprised Margaret. "I've known our mother my whole life," James said quietly, "and I've never seen her look the way she did when she talked about you. Whatever else she's done wrong, I don't think she regrets your existence. I think she regrets not having the courage to be your mother." Lily wiped at her eyes angrily, clearly frustrated by her own tears. "That doesn't make it better. Regret doesn't change what happened." "No," James agreed, "but maybe it's a starting point. Maybe we can build something new from this mess. You, me, Margaret, we're all victims of the same lies. But we don't have to let those lies define our future." Margaret watched as Lily considered this, her daughter's intelligent mind visibly working through the implications. Finally, Lily straightened her shoulders, took a deep breath, and nodded. "Okay," she said, her voice steadier now. "Let's go meet the woman who gave birth to me and then pretended I didn't exist." James offered his arm in a gesture that was both old-fashioned and oddly comforting. After a moment's hesitation, Lily took it, and together the siblings walked toward the mansion's entrance. Margaret followed several steps behind, her role suddenly unclear. She was no longer simply the mother, no longer the sole person Lily depended on. She was the woman who had unknowingly helped perpetuate a lie, and she didn't know if Lily would ever fully forgive her for that. The drawing room had always intimidated Margaret with its soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and walls lined with portraits of Whitmore ancestors dating back generations. Now, walking into it with Lily, The space felt even more oppressive, as if the weight of family history itself was pressing down on them. Victoria Whitmore stood by the massive fireplace, her usually impeccable appearance showing signs of strain. Her silver hair not quite as perfectly styled, her makeup unable to fully conceal the dark circles under her eyes, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped a delicate teacup. When Victoria's eyes landed on Lily, the teacup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble hearth with a crash that made everyone jump. But Victoria didn't seem to notice the broken china at her feet. Her gaze was locked on her daughter with an intensity that was almost painful to witness, tears immediately spilling down her carefully composed face. "You look so much like my mother," Victoria whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Like the portrait of her in the East Wing when she was young. The same eyes, the same expression when you're trying to be brave." She took a tentative step forward, then stopped herself, as if aware that she had no right to approach. "Lily. My Lily." "I'm not yours," Lily said coldly, though Margaret could hear the tremor beneath her daughter's words. "You gave up that right 18 years ago when you paid someone else to raise me." Victoria's face crumpled and she pressed a hand to her mouth, nodding as if accepting the judgment she knew she deserved. "You're right. You're absolutely right. I don't deserve to call you mine. I don't deserve to even be in the same room as you after what I did." "Then why am I here?" Lily demanded, her voice rising. "Why did you write that letter if you were just going to keep hiding the truth? Why keep that confession locked away instead of destroying it?" Victoria moved to sit in one of the antique chairs near the fireplace, her legs seeming to give out beneath her. Margaret had never seen the formidable woman look so broken, so utterly defeated. "Because I couldn't bear to erase the only acknowledgement of your existence. That letter was my penance, my confession, my insurance that someday the truth would come out. I was too much of a coward to tell it myself, but I couldn't completely bury it either." "How convenient," Lily said bitterly, but she moved further into the room, drawn despite her anger. "You get to keep your conscience clear while I grow up not knowing who I really am. Did you ever think about me? Did you ever wonder if I was happy, if I had enough to eat, if I was safe?" "Every single day," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "I watched you from a distance whenever I could. When Margaret would bring you with her to work before you started school, I would make excuses to pass through whatever room you were in just to catch a glimpse of you. I heard your first words. You said, 'flower,' while touching the roses in the garden. I saw you take your first steps on the terrace outside. I listened to you play piano through the walls when you taught yourself with that keyboard Margaret bought you." Margaret saw Lily's composure crack at this revelation, tears threatening to spill despite her determination to remain strong. "You watched me like I was some kind of zoo animal, something to observe from a safe distance. I watched you like a mother watches her child through a window, knowing she can never hold them," Victoria corrected, her own tears flowing freely now. "Do you know what torture it was? Seeing you grow into this beautiful, intelligent, talented young woman and knowing I had no right to take credit for any of it. Watching Margaret comfort you when you cried, celebrate your achievements, guide you through life while I stood on the sidelines." "You chose to stand on the sidelines," James interjected, his voice harder than Margaret had heard before. He moved to stand beside Lily in a gesture of solidarity that clearly surprised and touched his sister. "No one forced you to give Lily away. You made that choice out of fear and selfishness." Victoria's eyes moved to her son, and the pain in her expression deepened. I know exactly what I am, James. I'm a coward who chose reputation over her own child. I'm the villain in this story, and I accept that. But that doesn't mean I didn't love her. It doesn't mean I don't still love her." "Love?" Lily's voice cracked on the word, and the tears finally came streaming down her face as 18 years of questions and confusion and unconscious grief poured out. "You don't get to call it love. Love means showing up. Love means sacrifice. Love means putting your child first even when it's hard. You didn't love me. You loved your reputation more." Victoria stood abruptly, taking several steps toward Lily before stopping herself again. "You're right. What I did wasn't love. It was weakness. But what I feel now, looking at you, seeing who you've become despite my abandonment, that is love. And I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve a second chance. But I need you to know that giving you away was the biggest mistake of my life, and not a day has passed that I haven't regretted it. Margaret watched as Lily struggled with the conflicting emotions warring across her face, anger and hurt, and longing all tangled together. She wanted to intervene, to protect her daughter from this pain, but she knew this conversation needed to happen without her interference. I used to dream about having a different life, Lily said quietly, her voice small and wounded. When other kids at school talked about their big houses and family vacations and college funds, I would imagine what it would be like to have those things. But I always thought my real life was better, because at least I had a mother who loved me unconditionally. She looked at Margaret with an expression that broke her heart. Now I don't even have that, because she's not really my mother, and you... She turned back to Victoria. You were never a mother to me at all. Lily, that's not fair, Margaret found herself saying, unable to stay silent any longer. Whatever biology says, I am your mother. I raised you, loved you, sacrificed for you. That doesn't stop being true just because we don't share DNA. But it's all based on a lie, Lily cried, spinning to face Margaret. How am I supposed to trust anything when the foundation of my entire life was false? Because love isn't false, James said quietly, drawing everyone's attention. I've been thinking about this a lot over the past few days. Margaret isn't your biological mother, but she chose you every single day for 18 years. That's more real than biology. Our mother... He looked at Victoria with an expression that mixed disappointment and compassion. She gave birth to you, but Margaret raised you. Both things are true and both things matter. Lily stared at her brother, this man who was essentially a stranger but who shared her blood, her family, her face. Why are you being so understanding? I could take everything from you. The inheritance, the company, the Whitmore name. Legally, I might have a stronger claim than you do. James smiled sadly. Because you're my sister. And because after meeting you, after seeing your strength and your intelligence and your heart, I think you'd probably do a better job running the company than I ever could. Besides, there's enough for both of us. This doesn't have to be a competition. Everything is a competition in families like this, Victoria said bitterly, finally moving to sit back down, exhausted by the emotional weight of the conversation. That's part of why I was so terrified of the scandal. My father would have disinherited me, cut me off completely. He was a ruthless man who valued the family name above everything, including his own children. He's dead now, James said bluntly. And maybe it's time we stopped letting dead men's priorities dictate our choices. Lily deserves to know her family, to have access to her inheritance, to make her own decisions about who she wants to be. Lily looked overwhelmed, swaying slightly on her feet. Margaret instinctively moved to steady her, and this time Lily leaned into the support, letting Margaret wrap an arm around her shoulders. I need time, Lily said finally, her voice exhausted. I need time to process all of this, to figure out what I want, who I am now that everything has changed. I can't just suddenly become a Whitmore and pretend the last 18 years didn't happen. No one is asking you to, James assured her gently. Take all the time you need. But know that whenever you're ready, you have a brother who wants to know you. And, he glanced at Victoria, a mother who, despite everything, has always wanted you. 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo, where Lily existed between two worlds without fully belonging to either. She'd returned to school, going through the motions of senior year while carrying a secret that felt like it might crush her under its weight. Her friends noticed the change in her, the distance in her eyes, the way she'd zone out during conversations, the forced quality of her smiles, but Lily couldn't bring herself to explain. How could she tell her classmates that she was secretly a Whitmore, that the family whose name was on half the buildings in the city was her biological family? Margaret watched helplessly as her daughter drifted further away emotionally, even though they still shared the same small apartment. Lily was polite but distant, answering questions with monosyllables, spending most of her time locked in her room or at the library. The easy affection they'd always shared felt strained now. Every interaction weighted with the knowledge that their relationship was built on a foundation Margaret herself hadn't known was false. James called every few days, respectful of Lily's need for space but persistent in his efforts to build a connection. He'd text photos of places around the estate with captions like, "You used to play here when you were 3," or "Mom says this was your favorite tree to climb." Lily never responded, but Margaret noticed she saved every photo, creating a digital archive of a childhood she couldn't remember, but that belonged to her nonetheless. On a cold Saturday morning, Margaret found Lily sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, staring at the Whitmore Industries website. The company's portfolio was impressive: real estate development, technology investments, philanthropic foundations. James's face appeared on the leadership page, handsome and professional, with a biography that detailed his Harvard MBA and his role as chief operating officer. "He's only 26, Lily said without looking up, her voice thoughtful. "And he's already running a billion-dollar company. Meanwhile, I was planning to work retail to pay for community college classes." Margaret sat down across from her, choosing her words carefully. "Different circumstances create different paths. That doesn't make one better than the other, doesn't it?" Lily turned the laptop so Margaret could see the screen better. "Look at this. The Whitmore Foundation provides scholarships to underprivileged students. They gave away $3 million last year alone. I could have been helping people instead of being one of the people who needed help." "You still can," Margaret pointed out gently. "If you choose to claim your place in that family, you'd have the resources to make a real difference in the world." Lily's expression turned conflicted, her fingers drumming nervously on the table. "But what does that make me? Someone who benefits from the same privilege that was stolen from me? Someone who joins the people who've had everything while people like us, like you, struggle to survive?" The distinction wasn't lost on Margaret. Lily had said, "like you," instead of "like us," unconsciously separating herself from the working-class identity she'd grown up with. It hurt, but Margaret understood. Lily was trying to figure out where she belonged, and that meant questioning everything, including her relationship with the only mother she'd ever known. "You don't have to choose between your past and your future," Margaret said softly. "You can honor where you came from while embracing who you might become. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." Before Lily could respond, her phone buzzed with a text. Margaret saw her daughter's expression shift from surprise to something more complicated as she read the message. "It's James," Lily said, showing Margaret the screen. "He wants to meet for coffee. Just the two of us. He says there's something important he needs to discuss about the family business and my legal rights to the inheritance." Margaret's stomach tightened with anxiety. This was the moment she'd been dreading, when lawyers and money and legal claims would transform this personal trauma into something transactional. "Do you want to go?" Lily was quiet for a long moment, staring at the phone in her hand. "I think I have to. I need to understand what claiming my birthright actually means, whether it's worth destroying the life I thought I had." An hour later, Lily stood in front of her closet, agonizing over what to wear. The clothes that had always been good enough, thrift store finds and hand-me-downs, suddenly felt inadequate. She was meeting her brother, a Harvard-educated executive, in a coffee shop where a single latte probably cost more than her hourly wage at the grocery store where she'd worked last summer. "Wear the blue sweater," Margaret suggested from the doorway. "The one we got for your birthday. It brings out your eyes." Lily pulled out the sweater, holding it against herself as she looked in the mirror. "Victoria's eyes," she corrected quietly. "These are her eyes, not mine." The casual cruelty of the statement made Margaret flinch, but she tried not to show it. "They're your eyes, Lily. Whatever genetics gave them to you, they belong to you." Lily turned to face her, and Margaret saw tears threatening to spill. "I don't know who I am anymore, Mom. Or Margaret. Or whatever I'm supposed to call you now." Her voice cracked on the uncertainty. "Every time I look in the mirror, I see a stranger. Someone who was supposed to grow up in that mansion, who was supposed to have piano lessons and SAT tutors and a trust fund. Instead, I got a donated keyboard and community college applications and you working double shifts to keep the lights on. Margaret crossed the room and pulled her daughter into a tight embrace, feeling Lily's resistance melt as she finally let herself cry. You got a mother who loved you unconditionally, Margaret whispered fiercely. You got 18 years of being the most important person in someone's world. You got a life where you learned resilience and compassion and the value of hard work. Those things are worth more than any trust fund. But what if I want both? Lily sobbed into Margaret's shoulder. What if I want the love and the stability and the resources to actually make something of myself? Does that make me selfish? Does that make me a traitor to everything we've struggled through together? It makes you human, Margaret assured her, stroking her daughter's hair the way she had when Lily was small. Wanting a better life doesn't make you selfish, and exploring your connection to the Whitmore family doesn't erase what we have together. I'm not going anywhere, Lily. I'm still your mother, regardless of biology. That's a choice we both make every day. Lily pulled back, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of the blue sweater she was now clutching. What if Victoria wants me to call her mom? What if she expects me to move into the mansion and become a proper Whitmore daughter? Then you'll make the choice that's right for you, Margaret said firmly. Not the choice that pleases Victoria or James or me. The choice that lets you become the person you want to be. Lily nodded slowly, taking a shaky breath and straightening her shoulders. She pulled on the blue sweater, fixed her hair, and grabbed her jacket. At the door, she paused and turned back to Margaret. I love you, she said quietly. I'm angry and confused, and I don't know how to process any of this. But I love you. You need to know that. Margaret's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I love you too, sweetheart. Always. After Lily left, Margaret sat alone in the quiet apartment, surrounded by the evidence of their simple life together. The photos on the walls, the well-worn furniture, the piano keyboard that had sparked Lily's love of music. She thought about Victoria watching from a distance all those years, seeing these moments but never living them. Part of Margaret felt a vindictive satisfaction in that. She had gotten to be Lily's mother in all the ways that mattered, while Victoria had only been a spectator to her own daughter's life. But another part of her, the part that loved Lily more than her own pride, wondered if she was holding her daughter back by making her feel guilty about exploring her birthright. Maybe the most loving thing Margaret could do now was step aside and let Lily discover who she was meant to be, even if that person was someone Margaret had never imagined raising. Her phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Thank you for giving her life when I was too weak to. Whatever happens next, I'm grateful she had you. Margaret stared at the message for a long time before finally typing a response. She's extraordinary. We both got that right, at least. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was acknowledgement that despite the lies and the pain and the betrayal, they'd both loved the same girl. And maybe that shared love could be the beginning of something new. Not a family in the traditional sense, but a complicated web of people all trying to do right by Lily, even when they disagreed about what right meant. The coffee shop James had chosen was elegant but not ostentatious. Exposed brick walls, local art, baristas who knew their customers by name. Lily spotted him immediately at a corner table, dressed casually in jeans and a navy sweater, 2 steaming cups already waiting. He stood when he saw her, his smile warm and genuine, and Lily felt some of her anxiety ease. Whatever else was complicated about this situation, James seemed sincere in his desire to know her. I ordered you a vanilla latte, James said as she approached, gesturing to the cup in front of the empty chair. But I realized after I ordered that I have no idea if you even like coffee. I just assumed because... He stopped himself, looking embarrassed. I'm sorry, I'm trying too hard. I do like vanilla lattes, Lily admitted, sitting down and wrapping her hands around the warm cup. Though I usually can only afford them on special occasions. This place charges $8 for a coffee. James winced at the reminder of their vastly different financial realities. I forget sometimes what things cost. That's terrible, isn't it? I've been so insulated by wealth that I don't even think about what's expensive anymore. "It's not your fault," Lily said, surprising herself with the generosity. "You were born into that world. I was supposed to be born into it too, apparently. But then someone decided otherwise." They sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment, both sipping their drinks. Lily studied her brother more closely now that they were alone together. He had kind eyes, she decided. Despite the privilege and the expensive education and the executive position, there was something fundamentally decent about James that reminded her of the best teachers she'd had. People who had power, but chose to wield it gently. "I asked you here because I've been meeting with lawyers," James said finally, his tone becoming more serious. "Trying to understand the legal implications of your existence. And Lily, it's complicated, but the bottom line is this. You have a legitimate claim to a significant portion of the Whitmore estate." Lily's heart began to race, her palms suddenly sweaty despite the cool autumn air drifting through the shop's open door. "How significant?" "Our grandfather's will established a trust that divided assets among his direct descendants," James explained, pulling out a folder and opening it to reveal dense legal documents. "At the time of his death, everyone believed I was the only grandchild. But you're actually the eldest. According to the terms of the trust, you're entitled to approximately 40% of the estate. I would retain 60% as the legitimate heir, but your birthright claim is legally sound." The numbers were so large they didn't feel real. Lily tried to do the math in her head based on what she'd read about the Whitmore fortune, but her brain couldn't quite process the zeros involved. 40% of $1 billion? Closer to $2 billion now, James corrected gently. "The estate has grown significantly since our grandfather passed. We're talking about approximately $800 million, Lily. Real estate holdings, stock portfolios, trust funds, business interests, enough to change your life completely." Lily felt dizzy, the coffee shop seeming to tilt around her. $800 million. She could pay for college, any college she wanted. She could help Margaret retire, buy her a real house instead of that cramped apartment. She could travel, explore, become anyone she wanted to be without financial constraints holding her back. "But there's a complication," James continued, his expression troubled. "If you claim your inheritance, it becomes public record. The media will have a field day with this story. Secret daughter, working class upbringing, family scandal. Your life will never be private again. Every decision you make, every relationship you have, every mistake you might make, it will all be scrutinized under a microscope." The reality of that prospect sobered Lily immediately. She thought about her friends at school, the quiet life she'd always imagined for herself. "I'd become famous. Or infamous, depending on how the story is spun." "Exactly," James confirmed. "And it won't just affect you. Margaret will be dragged through it too. Reporters will want to know what she knew, when she knew it, whether she was complicit in hiding you. Our mother will face massive public judgment for abandoning her child. The whole family will be torn apart by scrutiny." Lily took a long drink of her latte, trying to organize her racing thoughts. "But if I don't claim it, I just... what? Go back to planning for community college and hoping I can afford textbooks?" James leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I have a proposal. Something I've been thinking about constantly since I found out about you. What if we handle this privately? I'll transfer a portion of my personal assets to you immediately. Let's say $50 million to start, in a trust fund with your name on it. Enough to secure your future completely. Pay for any education you want, set up Margaret comfortably for life. In exchange, you don't pursue the full legal claim, and we keep this situation within the family." Lily stared at him, trying to process what he was offering. $50 million. It was an incomprehensible amount of money, and yet it was only a fraction of what she was legally entitled to. "You're asking me to accept a payoff to stay quiet, just like Victoria paid Margaret to stay quiet 18 years ago." James flinched at the comparison. "It's not like that. I'm not trying to silence you or erase your existence. I'm trying to protect you from a media circus that would destroy any chance you have at a normal life. And honestly, I'm trying to protect our mother too. even though she doesn't deserve it. Why would you protect her? Lily demanded, anger flaring. She threw me away like garbage. She let you believe you were an only child while I grew up thinking I had no siblings at all. Why would you defend her? Because she's still my mother, James said simply. And despite everything she's done wrong, she's a human being who made a terrible mistake out of fear. I can be angry with her and still not want to see her destroyed publicly. Can't both things be true? Lily wanted to argue, to insist that Victoria deserved whatever judgment came her way. But she thought about the broken woman she'd seen in the drawing room, the genuine anguish in Victoria's eyes when she'd looked at her daughter. Maybe James was right. Maybe people were more complicated than simple villain narratives allowed. What about Margaret? Lily asked. Have you discussed this with her? James shook his head. This is your decision, not hers. Though I'd make sure she was taken care of too. A trust fund for her retirement, full ownership of a home, whatever she needs. She raised you when our mother wouldn't. She deserves to be rewarded for that, not punished. Lily's eyes filled with tears at the thought of Margaret's face when she could finally stop working double shifts, stop worrying about rent, stop sacrificing everything for a daughter who now knew she'd been purchased with blood money. She'd never have to clean another toilet again. Never, James confirmed. She could travel, pursue hobbies, do all the things people dream about in retirement. And you, Lily, you could go to MIT, or Harvard, or Oxford, anywhere you want. You could study music formally, get the piano lessons you taught yourself from YouTube. You could become anything you want to be without financial barriers. It was tempting. God, it was so tempting. Lily imagined walking away from this mess with enough money to transform not just her life but Margaret's too, without the invasion of privacy that would come with a public legal battle. She could have security and anonymity, opportunity and peace. But another part of her, the part that had grown up struggling, that had watched Margaret work herself to exhaustion, that had learned to question systems that protected the wealthy at the expense of everyone else, balked at accepting less than what she was owed. Wasn't this just another way of letting powerful people buy their way out of consequences? I need time to think about this, Lily said finally. This isn't a decision I can make over coffee, James. This is my entire future we're talking about. Of course, James agreed immediately. Take all the time you need, but Lily, there is one more thing you should know. He hesitated, clearly wrestling with whether to continue. Our father, Robert Whitmore, is coming home from his business trip in Asia next week. He doesn't know about you yet. Mother hasn't told him. The revelation that Robert Whitmore knew nothing about Lily's existence hung over her like a storm cloud for the next 5 days. She moved through her routine mechanically, school, homework, awkward dinners with Margaret where they both pretended everything was normal, while her mind constantly returned to the impossible choice before her. $50 million in privacy, or $800 million in a lifetime of public scrutiny. Security bought with silence or justice that came with a price she wasn't sure she could pay. Margaret noticed the change, of course. She always did. On Thursday evening, she found Lily sitting on the floor of her bedroom, surrounded by college brochures she'd once pored over with desperate hope. MIT, Stanford, Juilliard, schools that had seemed like impossible dreams just weeks ago, but were now suddenly within reach if she was willing to accept James's offer. Talk to me, Margaret said softly, settling onto the floor beside her daughter. You've been carrying this alone for days, and I can see it's tearing you apart. Lily picked up the MIT brochure, running her fingers over the glossy cover. James offered me $50 million to keep quiet and not pursue my full legal claim. He says it's to protect me from the media circus, but part of me wonders if it's really about protecting Victoria, protecting the Whitmore reputation from the scandal of what she did. Margaret was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. What does your gut tell you? Not your anger or your hurt or your sense of justice. What does your deepest instinct say? I don't know, Lily admitted, her voice breaking. Part of me wants to burn their whole world down, make Victoria face public consequences for abandoning me. But another part of me just wants to take the money and disappear, Live a quiet life where I'm not defined by this scandal. And there's this other part," she paused, surprised by what she was about to say, "that actually likes James, that wants to have a brother, to build some kind of relationship with the family I never knew I had." "Those are all valid feelings," Margaret said gently. "You don't have to choose just one. People are complicated, Lily. Situations are complicated. There's rarely a purely right or purely wrong answer." Lily looked at the woman who had raised her, seeing the exhaustion in her face, the premature aging that came from years of physical labor and financial stress. "If I take James's offer, you'd never have to work again. I could buy you a house, set up your retirement, give you the life you've always deserved. Isn't that worth something?" Margaret's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out to cup Lily's face in her work-worn hands. "My darling girl, I didn't raise you to make decisions based on what's convenient for me. I raised you to stand up for what's right, to value integrity over comfort, to be brave even when it's hard." "But what if I don't know what's right?" Lily whispered, leaning into Margaret's touch. "What if there is no right answer, just different versions of compromise?" "Then you choose the compromise you can live with," Margaret said firmly. "The one that lets you sleep at night, that honors who you are and who you want to become. Money is important, security is important, but so is knowing you didn't sell out your own truth." Before Lily could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from James. "Father arrived home early. Mother is telling him everything tonight. He wants to meet you tomorrow. No pressure, but I think you should come. He deserves to meet his stepdaughter, and you deserve to meet him before making your final decision." Lily showed Margaret the message, watching her face carefully. "What do you think?" "I think Robert Whitmore is the only major player in this drama who isn't guilty of anything except ignorance," Margaret said thoughtfully. "Meeting him might give you perspective you don't have yet. And besides, you should know the full family before you decide whether you want to be part of it." The next afternoon, Lily found herself once again approaching the Whitmore estate, but this time with a different kind of nervousness in her stomach. James had sent a car for her and Margaret, a detail that had made Lily uncomfortable, but that Margaret had insisted they accept with grace. As they pulled up to the mansion, Lily could see figures standing on the front steps. Victoria, James, and a tall, distinguished man with silver hair and an aura of quiet authority that reminded Lily of successful businessmen in movies. Robert Whitmore watched their approach with an expression Lily couldn't quite read. When she stepped out of the car, his eyes widened slightly and she saw him glance at Victoria with something that looked like accusation mixed with disbelief. But when his gaze returned to Lily, it softened into something gentler, almost grandfatherly. "You have Elizabeth's eyes," he said quietly, naming Victoria's mother, his late mother-in-law. James was right. The resemblance is remarkable. He extended his hand formally, a gesture of respect that surprised Lily. "I'm Robert Whitmore, and I owe you an apology, even though I had no knowledge of Victoria's deception. You deserved better than what this family gave you." The graciousness of the greeting disarmed Lily completely. She'd expected coldness, skepticism, maybe even hostility. Instead, Robert treated her with the courtesy he might show an important business associate, with dignity and genuine interest. "Victoria has spent the past 12 hours explaining everything to me," Robert continued, gesturing for them to come inside. "The affair, the pregnancy, the arrangement with Margaret. I won't pretend I'm not disappointed in my wife's choices, but I also understand the pressures she was under from her father. Nathaniel Whitmore was not a kind man, and he ruled this family with an iron fist that didn't allow for human weakness." They gathered in a different room this time, a sunlit conservatory filled with plants and comfortable furniture that felt less formal than the drawing room. Victoria sat apart from the group, her posture rigid with shame, while James positioned himself near Lily in a gesture of silent support that she was beginning to appreciate. "I've spoken with our attorneys," Robert said, settling into a chair and gesturing for everyone else to sit as well. "And I understand the legal complexities of your situation, Lily. You have a legitimate claim to a substantial inheritance, and pursuing that claim is entirely within your rights. But I want you to understand something that James may not have fully explained." He paused, studying Lily with keen intelligence. The Whitmore fortune is not just money sitting in a bank account. It's businesses that employ thousands of people, foundations that support important causes, real estate that provides housing and commercial space across 3 states. A protracted legal battle over inheritance could destabilize all of that. Stock prices could drop, business partners could lose confidence, employees could lose jobs. The collateral damage would extend far beyond this family. Lily felt her stomach sink as the true weight of her decision settled over her. It wasn't just about punishing Victoria or claiming what was hers by right. Real people's livelihoods hung in the balance, people who had nothing to do with the lies that had shaped her life. "Are you trying to guilt me into accepting James's offer?" she asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "No," Robert said firmly. "I'm trying to give you complete information so you can make an informed choice. If you decide to pursue your full claim, I'll respect that decision and work to minimize the damage. But you should know what you're choosing, not just for yourself, but for everyone connected to this family's empire." Margaret spoke up for the first time, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "With respect, Mr. Whitmore, Lily is 18 years old. She shouldn't have to carry the burden of protecting your business interests when this family failed to protect her. Maybe if the company is so fragile that the truth could destroy it, that says more about how it's been built than about Lily's right to claim her inheritance." Robert turned to Margaret with an expression of surprise and grudging respect. "You're not wrong, Ms. Chen, and I'm not suggesting Lily should prioritize our convenience over her rights. I'm simply asking her to make her choice with open eyes, understanding all the implications." Lily looked around the conservatory at the faces watching her. Victoria's guilty desperation, James's supportive concern, Robert's neutral assessment, and Margaret's fierce protective love. 4 people, 4 different investments in her decision, and Lily alone had to bear the weight of choosing. "I need to ask Victoria something," Lily said suddenly, turning to face her biological mother directly for the first time since entering the room. "If you could go back 18 years and make a different choice, what would you do?" Victoria's composure finally cracked completely. Tears streamed down her face as she met her daughter's eyes. "I would keep you. I would tell my father to go to hell and keep my baby. I would endure the scandal, the judgment, the loss of inheritance, all of it, if it meant I got to be your mother." Her voice broke on the last word. "I was weak and foolish, and I've paid for that weakness every day since. But if I could go back, I would choose you. Always you." In the end, Lily's story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. That identity is not simply a matter of biology or circumstance, but a choice we make every day about who we want to become. She stood at the crossroads between 2 worlds, one built on love and sacrifice, the other on birthright and privilege, and had to decide which path honored both her past and her future. Margaret raised her with nothing but devotion, while Victoria gave her life but abandoned her out of fear. Both women shaped who Lily became, and both deserved consideration in her final choice. But what would you have done in her place? Would you have pursued justice and claimed every dollar you were owed, even if it meant destroying the fragile peace of everyone involved? Or would you have accepted the compromise, taking enough to secure your future while protecting the people who, despite their flaws, genuinely cared about your well-being? This story reminds us that families are not always defined by blood, that forgiveness is not the same as forgetting, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is choose compassion over vengeance. Lily discovered that she could honor Margaret's sacrifice while also acknowledging Victoria's regret, that she could be both the daughter of a housekeeper and a Whitmore heir. That identity is expansive enough to hold all our contradictions. The question is not whether she made the right choice, but whether she made a choice she could live with, one that reflected her values, her heart, and the person she wanted to become. If this story touched your heart, or made you think differently about family, identity, and the power of forgiveness, please subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Your support allows us to continue bringing you powerful narratives that challenge, inspire, and move us all. Comment below and tell us, what would you have done in Lily's position? We'd love to hear your perspective.